an absolutely gorgeous day yesterday, and now we're down to nearly freezing today. So spring is being a little bit weird. Sorry, it looks like I'm not on screen for some reason. Can you see me? If you can, let me know in the chat. All right, so I'm reading the greetings here, and there's one question. Why is that not coming up? The question is, what do you do about crystallized Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed-proof white? Well, I just add some water and stir it up, and it gets creamy again all over again. It's the weirdest stuff. It crystallizes, right? But it works great. So I will use that for touch-ups and things like that. And yeah, that's what I do. So let me just get on back to where we left off last week. This was our reference picture, this lovely little water lily with a reflection. And let me just recap for a moment that I drew this out. The link to the first one is actually in the description underneath this video. Oh, there, it was a delayed reaction there that I got with that question. Anyway, so where I started was with the drawing, and we talked about getting some washes in, and none of the washes are just one solid color like when you paint your walls kind of thing. So that's kind of where we left off. When we were working on our water lily itself, we were really focusing on creating some colors rather than just gray, right? We always tend to think of white. Shadows for white is gray, but seldom. Okay, so let me just grab my squares here. I just wanted to remind you about this very useful tool. It's hidden in here somewhere. This is just a couple of little squares that have a tiny hole in them. And when you look at this and you think, oh my goodness, that shadow's way too dark. But if you compare and compare, I'm actually pretty accurate. Let me zoom in on this for a second and you'll see what I mean. So I am not darker than the reference. In fact, I might even be a little bit light. Now, for the watercolor, I think that that's fine as long as a slight bit whiter. But, you know, that is quite a shocker, isn't it, when you see that against the white? So these are really helpful because you can't always trust what you think is the right value. Let me move this over a little bit here. Okay, so now we need to start thinking about this part of the water. There are all kinds of things going on here. There's some reflected light down here, so we need some lighter areas, and it has this sort of ripply effect. I'm going to try to capture a little bit of that, but there's also, look here, we've got a little reflection of some sky or something, right? A little bit of blue up against that lily pad, some little sparkles of white. It might be debris sitting on the water. It might be a reflection. I think it's actually a little bit of debris on the water because it looks like there's some of these sitting on the lily pads too. It might be from a nearby tree, I don't know. But there's definitely some sort of little white, almost bubbles around the edges of the lily pads. And then we have all the little holes that are in the lily pads. As I said, I think that there was a hailstorm. There was probably a little bit of, it looks a little bit like a buckshot kind of thing here, but I won't put in quite as many. I would like this to look a little bit more polished, but I will put a few in because they're very interesting. All right, so let me see. Everybody can see me. That's good. All right, so we're good to go. Let's think about some of the colors I'm going to use. I'm going to use a little bit of this blue, but boy, not very much. So I'm going to use a little cobalt for this, I think. Actually, yes, I think cobalt. Little cerulean would also be fine, I'm sure. But some of that, and I don't need a large amount of that. I just need a little bit to work with here. I did pre-soften all of my paint, so I don't know, about 15-20 minutes ago, I came along and I put a bunch of water in on all my wells of dried paint so that these will be nice and creamy, so that I can get a nice even rich color as I'm applying it without having to slow down and work to try and get the paint out of the well. Right, so I need something that is in a brown gray kind of family. So I'm going to go, of course, to burnt sienna. It's a good standby, right? Burnt sienna is a good one. This through here looks like a lot of actual raw sienna. To me, that's how it looks. So I'm going to use some raw sienna. I'm going to use some burnt sienna. I have a fairly big area. I'm working on a quarter sheet. That's 11 by 15 inch. So that is, you know, that's the size I'm working, and so I will need a fair bit of color here. I'm also going to use some neutral tint for darkening this down. I could use blue, that would also work, but I'm going to use some neutral tint. It gives me a nice sort of brown color out of this. And you'll see how I mix over here on the right. You'll see that I am using some burnt sienna here, some of my neutral tint here. Neutral tint, for some of you that might not know, is an actual color that you can buy, and it's a really good dark. It's a little bit of a softer gray than the Payne's gray. Payne's, and it is definitely more dense. This gives you something a little bit softer. So I really like neutral tint. I've always got some paper towels that I'm blotting on. Hard to get everything on the screen at the same time, but I'll do my best. Okay, a little bit there, right there. Let's see if I move that over a bit so you can see when I blot. And I'm going to start with some small areas, just because it's going to be a little easier for me to manage. How about if I start right over here? I'm right-handed, so if I start on the left, it makes sense, right? So I'm going to use a combination of some raw sienna, some of my mixture here, and I'm going to work around some of these lighter areas. I'm just going to leave some spots on purpose. The key to getting this put in nice and smoothly is to fill up your brush and don't spread the paint too far. That's a really key factor to not getting a lot of brush marks in your washes. Just going to pull my mic over a little bit closer just in case. Okay, so I'm going to start in a small spot so it'll be nice and manageable. I'll start in this little triangle up here. Sometimes there's just not enough space. Let me shift over a bit here. Okay, so I'm going to start in this upper left-hand corner, and I'm going to begin with some raw sienna. And then I'm going to go over into my mixture of burnt sienna. You can see there's some variations in there. All right, so I'm going to go more into my neutral tint here as I try to get a little bit darker. And I might be able to just put a couple of hints of the reflection, the ripple. This was at our local botanical gardens, this waterlily. And I think they have like a bubbling system, to keep the water from being stagnant. So water lilies would be in a natural environment where they would have the water circulating. And you see, I'm just putting in a little bit of wet on wet there. It's, when I come in with my other color, this is important, is this color is nice and wet. This color that I'm adding to it is only damp. If you go wet into wet, you'll overwhelm the area. You won't have the control you want. So whenever you're working into wet color or wet paper, and you want to have a little bit of control and shape to what you're putting in, make sure that what you're putting into your brush and that your brush looks like. So it's surprisingly dry as I'm adding in this color. Now, I will speed up, of course, as I'm doing this, but I see little hints of blue going on in this one up here. So I might put a little bit of that in and just sort of dance around that color with some of these darks. And they may melt together a little bit. As I'm going along, I'm really trying to maintain the shape of this lily pad at the same time. So as I come along that edge, I have to be watching the shape that I'm creating. Now, this is the very edge of the painting. I'm not going to fuss too much with that. Touch in a little of each color. Let it sort of blend organically, and as I come over to this shape, this one's bigger, I'm going to have to really be careful. This is where it's really important to load up your brush, because I know that I'm going to have to slow down to shape this part of the, this part of the petals there. I'm also going to have to tuck into these tight spaces and that sort of thing. So I'm going to start off, I'll work light to dark, and I'm going to put in some raw sienna. I'm looking for some of those little bubbles along the edge. These are the kind of, just kind of interesting little details. They're not really distracting. They're not, I'm not going to make them high contrast or anything like that by the time I put a bit of color in there and everything. But, sometimes those little interesting bits kind of keep the viewer engaged. And another one, little one right here. Keep the paint wet. I'll come back and I'll re-wet areas if I feel that those areas are drying faster than I can paint. So I'll come back and I will keep loading up more paint here. If it's too, I don't want it to get it too dark. So, I might even add a little water to that. But the goal here is just keep that edge nice and wet. Or not the edge, but the entire wash there should be nice and wet. I see a shine on it. Hopefully you can see a bit of shine on that wet area there. That means I can still work into it. So I can't go very far with a brush load. We always think we can go further. Another culprit to this problem is not mixing enough paint in the first place. So we do have to watch that we make a puddle that's bigger than you think you're going to need. I've plenty there to spread out, but I won't. I'm just going to keep adding to it. Now let's just say that this part here is starting to dry, and I'm still fussing. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my raw sienna and make sure that this edge right here stays good and wet. So I'm actually plopping a whole bunch more paint, watery paint right here. And that's going to be what I call my leading edge. So this is the leading edge. It's leading to where I need to add more detail. So I'm piling up a little bit more there. That's going to buy me time so I can come back over here. So I'm going to come back into here with this dark color and start swirling around some of the color. Make sure my brush isn't too wet because that's going to bleed more than I want it to. And there's some sort of swirly things that are going on here. I'm not going to think about it too hard. I'm just going to take a glance and try to replicate something similar. That blotting. When I blot this part, not the tip, you know, where the color is. I blot the belly part. And what's great about understanding this part of watercolor is that I don't have that same feeling of panic whenever I do this. Hello, New Zealand. Yeah, I don't know what time it is there, but it's got to be like the middle of the night or something. So this is a little bit of a start to getting some of the ripply effect of some of this. I'm going to come in with just straight neutral tint here because I can tell that this is going to dry much lighter. Whenever you paint on something that's wet, it's always going to end up a lot lighter. So I'm just seeing the little ripples, and I like to keep my reference picture fairly close so that I'm not looking too far when I'm glancing back and forth. A lot can be lost in that little distance. You wouldn't think so, but it can be lost so easily. Okay, not sure that this is staying wet, so let's just add a little bit more color here, or start pulling that down a little bit more just to make sure I don't run into problems. Now you can see immediately when I put that on there that that was a little drier, right? It's obviously not blending as much. So I'm just going to use a damp cloth or a damp brush, and maybe even a little bit of that raw sienna again, and just sort of tickle that a bit so that that color starts to flow again. All right, so I think I'm okay. I've left a couple of little spots around the little bubbles here so that they will, I can come back to those later and add a bit there. But I'm going to paint around as much as I possibly can. I'm going to put a little bit of green right in that spot because this line coming across and that little gap would be a bit of green there. So I'll come back and add that in. David's asking, is my board on a slight incline? My board is flat, actually. But many artists do use an incline on their watercolor to keep the paint flowing downward. You know, if I'm coming away from this spot here, yes, I could have this slightly elevated at this end and tilted down towards me, and that will keep that bead or that leading edge wet as well. That is the preferred method for a lot of people, actually. So, you know, give both a try. See what works best for you. Don't you love how I can just work on this space and not panic about it and rush because I've really filled it up with lots of wet color? I think that's, when I figured that one out, it was like such an aha moment for me. Good morning, Michelle, Becky. Oh, I'm glad you could make it. Yeah, thank you. The audio is breaking up. It's looking pretty strong right here on my end. Could be your connection. Currently, it says. Oh, wait a minute. I don't know what it says. Where's my mouse? Oh, I'm getting the intermediate thing. I am actually looking into a new internet provider just because of this problem. All right, so I'm continuing to come in with more of this wiggly dark stuff with the neutral tint mixed with a bit of burnt sienna. The paint always travels a little bit on the surface, like on a wet surface. It's going to keep crawling, right? So if you need to leave like little gaps in between, don't make your paint too wet. It's just going to fill right in. Using a blotted brush here just to help integrate the previous strokes to the ones I'm doing now. Knit them together basically. Okay, so much more interesting than just having a flat surface or flat wash there. I don't think I can turn anything else off that might be using the Wi-Fi. It's weird, but yeah, there's nothing else to turn off. I've even like dirty cameras, everything. But so looking at changing that in the coming weeks, or upgrading somehow, or something along those lines. Okay, I think I got alone. I've got a little corner right in here. Might not match my photo exactly because I did draw this out. And I'm not concerned. I can create my own painting. I'm just going to come in here with some various color. The small area. Okay, so I'm going to fill in some of the other small areas before I actually start working on this large section down here. That'll be the scary one, right? So raw sienna. I'm still on screen, so no bubbles in this little section. So I'm starting with raw sienna. Get rid of the white first. Give a little bit of a sort of a golden undertone to this. I'm going to get fancy here and try and do two at the same time. Now into my darks and let them sort of just flow and mingle in this water. Now I do have to make sure whenever you're working on something that is already wet, consider, the watercolor dries lighter, but consider that it's going to dry extra light, like almost twice as light when you work on a wet surface versus working on a dry surface. And that's because, there's already a lot of water introduced to the extra water introduced to the wash or to the color that you're putting on because the color underneath is wet. Put my hand in paint. That's what I get for trying to do two at the same time. Put my hand in the paint. There's a couple of those little, oh no, I'm looking at the wrong spot here. It's this one right here that I'm doing. I'm just going to lift a little bit right at that edge, just right there. It seems to have a little bit of a lighter bit right along the edge there. This triangle section has a few of those little white bits. What pigment did I use under this pigment that I'm painting now? It was raw sienna. So the colors I'm using are raw sienna, burnt sienna, neutral tint. Cold coffee again. So I'm not wetting these sections first. I'm deliberately not because I need to leave a couple of those little interesting bits in the water. The little bits of leaf, or I don't know what they are, but there's like little shapes in there. Didn't do my raw sienna first there, so I'll have to add it in as I go. Don't worry about getting the shapes exactly the same. I mean, who cares, right? It's certainly not, it's not a deal breaker if you get it the same as the photo. It's the feeling of the painting that you should be focused on, not so much the matching the photo. You take a photo of something and with the idea of maybe I'll paint this. But consider the reason why you took that photo. What was it that appealed to you? I bet it wasn't the details. Most of the time it's not the details. It's just the collection of shapes and colors, the values, things like that. Little interesting bits there. Now you can see, once you get a little bit of texture and things like that that you have on the water surface, you can see how unfinished the actual lily pads are themselves. First of all, they don't have all the the little holes in them and that sort of thing, but they're looking kind of flat. Well, they are just basically a wash so far. Brazen-hearted saying if anyone is still having hiccups or frozen audio or video, close YouTube completely and come back in. And yes, that's actually good advice. It happens quite often, it seems. I'm starting to think though that maybe this is a really high traffic YouTube time, perhaps. I don't know, but that could be. I'm blaming it on my Wi-Fi, but it could be YouTube itself. You know, you will be limited by the online traffic as well. Maybe we're in a sort of a digital traffic jam. I'm going to remind myself about some of these blues. I'm just going to paint my blue. Let's move this over a bit here so you can see. Okay, so those little bits of blue that were along the side of the lily pad here. I want to keep that in there. That's an interesting little detail there that I think could work out quite nicely. As for the rest of this, I'm going to go pretty wet. Put my hand in the paint again. I want to keep this wet for longer because I've got to go in and around shapes. I've got to shape a lily pad here. I missed a little white spot there, but no big deal. I'm sure I can find more like that. And I can always use that bleed-proof white if I need to. Really utilizing the tip of my brush to get into those little tight spots. I want to keep that wetter, so I'm going to drop in a little more color here so that it stays wet, because it's not going to stay wet on its own if I haven't put a lot of paint down there in the first place, because it's soaking straight into the paper. I don't mind a hard edge there, by the way. I put that in there. Normally I would put everything in while it was nice and wet, but that edge, I really don't mind that staying there on that blue. So I still have a nice sort of satin sheen on all of this, so I know it's still wet. I can paint into it without creating any blossoms, as long as I've still got a shine on there, and that's a really important part, actually. Knowing that you can paint into something. Apologies, Patricia. I think that it could be either on my end, or, as I said, YouTube traffic is just, maybe YouTube needs to upgrade. I'm not sure. But, all right, I'm going to come in now with my neutral tint and start putting in the little suggestion of the ripples and darks within this water. It's all kind of bleeding together a little bit, and that's actually okay by me. I need that to look natural if I can. Keep in mind when you work on wet, you walk away from what you just put on there, and it keeps moving. It will just keep doing that. Okay, so I am sorry that you guys are having issues, and I'm getting on my end, I'm getting the occasional error saying that, and it's just sort of popping up intermittently that there's not enough stream to give you guys a good smooth experience or whatever. And it doesn't say whether it's my fault or YouTube's fault, but that's what's happening on my end. So you could blame yours if you want, but I think it's actually on my end. I'm going to take some more neutral tint. It's a little darker now, so just put in a few little bits that might look a little drier. A little darker, a little drier. Drier meaning I've blotted my brush. And I really only need to suggest this. I obviously don't need to follow it perfectly. I like that. It's less boring than just putting it in flat, like a wash. I think, if I put this in as a flat wash, this would feel more like what, you've all been online, you've all seen what AI looks like, and sometimes it's just got, like, it's too polished. It doesn't look normal. And so this sort of calligraphy, I'm going to call it calligraphy, is a great way to make things look a lot more natural. And AI cannot represent, doesn't seem to be able to do this well. I recently had somebody suggest that one of my paintings was AI and don't think they follow me, because I don't think they would have said that if they knew that I paint all the time and that I'm a realist painter. But anyway, that's the kind of stuff that happens. And There we go. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. Where's the right remote? I've got remotes and telephones and everything all around me here. Okay, so it sort of looks like wood at the moment, but it will make, like, our mind will fill in the blanks once we get this part in. It will feel more like it's actual underwater, or it'll feel like we're looking under the water. How would I know to start with an orange base? I'm just looking at the colors in here, the lighter color under here. So that's what I did with this, is I put in some raw sienna underneath this. So now I've got to have big puddles because I have a big area that I have to deal with here. Now in this, I actually see a little bit of green reflected as well. So I think that that could be a nice little addition to this foreground area. Now I'm working in a bigger area. That means bigger brush. So I'm going to find myself a bigger brush that I can cover more territory with. You know, I can get more bang for my buck out of a bigger brush. So I've got a big area to cover. I need a bigger brush. I can use two brushes at the same time. Why not, right? Like, I get my smaller brush and I can pull up into these little spots that I'm going to have to here, and do that without a problem. I may end up having to come back into this more than one time. And that's because, you know, there's going to be some real darks versus some real lights, and to try and sort of incorporate some of that. Yeah, my printout here is looking definitely more brown than what you see here, right? Definitely looks more green. So I am going to be using some green. I could glaze a bit of green into some of these areas that I did previously if I want to. So I may end up doing that when I see the difference between what I've printed versus my digital copy. And so I'm going to get all my paint ready before I get going here. And I'm going to be painting this on dry. Now that always surprises people, because when if you want smooth wash, wet the paper first. And yes, that can be a real help to people that are learning and, struggle with the brush marks. But I'm trying to drive home the idea that you don't have to do that, especially if you are looking for stronger color. So first of all, mix stronger color. Should be good and fluid though, because this is a wash stage. And I'm going to make some of that green. So I'm going to take Aureolin and my cobalt blue here. Is that the right combination? Needs to be a little more olive, I think. And I think it will definitely turn olive when I put a little burnt sienna in it. So first I'm going to make my green with cobalt, Aureolin. There's my green, and it's bright and it's shiny and it's summery and all of that, but that's not what I'm seeing in the picture. So I'm going to take a little bit of a complement, the burnt sienna is a complementary color. If I take a little of that, let's put it off to the side so I don't add too much in at once. And I add that in, and instantly this becomes kind of an olive color, so much closer, much closer. Let's make a little more just to make sure I don't run out. Better to make too much than not enough. Let's just pretend paint is free, okay? can even add raw sienna to this. That would also make it more olive for sure. There we go. So being right-handed, I will start on the left. If you're left-handed, you'll do the opposite. I will be working around a couple of little, those little bubbles and things that are in the water. Okay, deep breath. Let's go. Now, as I go along, I might get quiet because I have to concentrate sometimes. And this part here is quite dark. Oh, I left off. I left off the bubbles after all. I got talking and distracted. Distracted myself. Gosh, you know you're getting old when, right? Distracted myself. Not that it matters. Okay, this is a tight area. Let's go to a smaller brush, because smaller brushes are just going to be easier to get into tight spots. And I really need to be careful about the edges of these lily pad, or the petals on the lily pad. The lily, I keep saying lily pad, but the petals on the lily, I need to shape those nicely. Okay, I'm going to alternate back and forth from big brush to small brush. Going to start bringing in some of the green here, I think. And around the reflection here is where I really need to stay tidy if I can. That was my finger brush I just used. Keep it nice and wet. If you want to keep the paint from creating any brush marks, keep it all good and wet. Definitely going to have to come in with another layer because this is going to dry a fair bit lighter. Okay, small brush again. Try to really clean up these edges. So this is what the scary part is, right? When you are trying to carefully work around something, then things start drying over here. Then you're in trouble. So how can we resolve that issue? And it comes up quite often in watercolor, no matter what you're painting. You're trying to do a big wet wash around something. Let's say you painted a flower or something like that, and you want to put in a background. You decided you wanted to put in a background, and now you have to put it in after the fact. So you have no choice. You have to paint around things. So keeping things wet is the key. If I come in with wetter color than what's on the paper, I will get blossoms, absolutely. And if you end up with, putting paint on something and, it was getting dry there, just bring in more color. Like if I add more green right here, that solved the problem. I love all the sort of abstraction in this background. In this water here. I think it's quite interesting. I'm not trying to make it identical. I like that murky greenish motion of the water. Thank you. All right, so let's keep going here. I've got to keep things good and wet. I'm getting a little nervous. I didn't make enough paint, as usual. Even though I've been doing this for such a long time, I still struggle with making enough paint. It's an affliction. You almost need to have like a one of those Corel plates or something just to mix and fill the whole Corel plate. And then maybe you'll have enough paint. Okay, back to my big brush for bigger areas and just a couple of a large brush and a small brush, something that you can use the small brush at, at a moment's notice to help keep things going. All this is good and wet still. I have time. Throw some of that in there to make sure it's similar. Trying to make sure I get rid of all those little white gaps. They look funny. You have those little white slivers between what you paint. I'm also trying not to overlap what I did. But remember how dark that was at the beginning? And look at it now. It's like it looks okay now, but it looks so crazy on white paper. I had to do it separately though, because I obviously wouldn't be able to put this color on top of this color and have it work out. So I couldn't just put the wash in and have that happen, work correctly. Now you see what I'm doing right here is I'm trying to make this dark that I put there, I'm trying to make it look continuous, because it will look really weird if I have it here or have it here and then poof, somehow it disappeared right beyond that petal. So it is good to kind of continue, when you're doing a background, continue things through so that they will look like they continue, that they look naturally continuous. I'm getting this part over here is starting to dry, so I need to blot my brush if I'm doing anything in that. Let's keep going here because I have to. This is where you really hold your breath. Go up in here, and I did something I shouldn't have, and that is I abandoned this edge and didn't keep it wet. So let's get that nice and wet again. That could make a mark there, but we'll do our best. Okay, now there's a couple of really light areas through here, so I need to water down my color to portray the light that's going to be in through this area here. I need to thin down my color a little bit more. I'm just going into my rinse water here. Yep, I got a line there where I had that, so I'm going to incorporate that into my water. In my water design, I should say. All right, I'm going to use my big brush because I'm in a big area here. Big brush, then use a small brush for to get up to the line with a little bit more control. Okay, we'll do that. Bit more neutral tint. And I got to get up into this area. Now I'm really babysitting a lot of kids here. It's like playing whack-a-mole when you're trying to keep up with all the wet edges. I'm going to leave a little gap along the top of that, like right under that one lily pad, so that it has a little bit of that bubble effect. I often get asked, well, can't you keep your paper wet by spraying? Absolutely not. And the reason being is that you can't control where the spray goes. And so you'll have paint running into all kinds of things that you don't want it to. So I need to come in here and start putting in some abstract shapes. Lights, darks, whatever you need to add in. Just make sure there's a good shine on everything so that you are not creating blossoms. Trying to use my smaller brush for this. I'm creating a little bit of my own design here because I did make I did have those hard lines forming when things were drying faster. So sometimes you can just incorporate into your design whatever goes wrong. Now that's not always possible, of course, but if you can, go for it. Really need to be shaping these that reflection nicely. So I actually have a pretty convincing reflection now, but I have to keep going here because I've still got some more real estate to cover. Now, if I want, I can also lift out a little bit of color. We'll see how applying the darks, but if I feel like I need to lift some color out, I'm sure I can. Getting some glare from where I'm sitting here. Try that. Don't spend too much time thinking about making it like the photo. I think it's unlikely that you'd be able to hit it on the head, nail it perfectly. But maybe you're that good. I don't know. Bits of green, bits of burnt sienna, mix it up a bit. But I do need to have a few little lighter areas in here. Just keep those in mind. Those are areas I'm not painting. I feel like the chat stopped here. Maybe you all left. I don't know. Oh, wait a minute. Painting a large area is stressful. I would have added another leaf just to reduce the water surface. Yeah, but then you got to paint around that leaf, right? And one of the questions I often will get is, can I put masking fluid on these areas? And that makes perfect sense, except that when you take the masking fluid off, you'll have a little rim of where the masking fluid was, and it will have lightened up the color here and the color here and so on. It's a good sort of practice to get used to work dry paper. It does take practice. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It does take practice, and it does take a little bit of courage, I guess. But you will get used to it. Suzette says, I'm so bad about not mixing enough color, so I literally just bought a set of small porcelain dishes today for that purpose. Yay, good. They're 3 inches across, used for dips and soy sauce. Yes, I've seen some of those at thrift stores, and if they're white, pick them up. They can be really useful for mixing those great big washes. All right, so now I've got a little bit of a difference between what's down here and what's up here. It's more golden up here and less green. So what I'm going to do is put more green in. I won't dull it down because I've already got lots of burnt sienna on there, or raw sienna. But I can definitely come in, and so this area here, for example, I can come in with a glaze. Now this area is dry, so I can come in and glaze in over top. And the other stuff will still show through. I'm using mostly transparent colors here. I've got Aureolin and Cobalt, both fairly transparent color. There, so I've got some variations in there. Don't think I like that raw sienna that I just plopped in there, so I'm going to take that out. And I'm going to reinforce a little bit of the pattern right in here. So if there's anywhere here that I really want to add a little bit more of that, I can certainly do that. But I do have one area right in here. I've got to tuck a dark into this section right here. Okay, so I've got some good action happening in the paper, in the water. Some interesting ripple effect. It feels a little bit like water because of what the abstract shapes are. So that's working out pretty well. I'm going to just add a little bit more green in a couple of spaces up here. Just a thin wash of it over top. And I'm using a bright green because of that burnt sienna, or the raw sienna that's underneath. So I'm not dulling down my color at all or making it more olive, because it will automatically turn olive on this color, on top of this color. So whenever you are glazing in color, think of the color underneath and how it's going to affect the color that you're adding. I see a lot of my students will mix the perfect color, and which would be perfect if they were working on white paper. But since you're not, you consider the addition of whatever's underneath as well. There's my neighbor's dogs. I was wondering where they were today. Bark, 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 bark. All right. So I'm just plopping a little bit of that green just to get me a little closer to the... Now this, I think in person, it looks a little more green than it does on my screen. That might be the camera adjusting or something like that. But it is a little bit more green in person. It's right. Raw sienna is not. It is more of a semi transparent, even kind of bordering on semi-opaque. So it is not a transparent color. But you can make almost any color transparent, more transparent, put it that way, by thinning it down. Katharina says, Arsh is a good paper for this as you are painting on dry first. Saunders Waterfoot would not dry a lot faster, I think. This is the two papers I use. Oh, okay. Yeah, different. Know the paper, whatever paper you're using, know it. Learn it and understand what it is capable of. If somebody's working on a student quality paper, this is a lot harder because the paint wants to sit more on the surface. And so much of it has to do with just the sizing in the paper, that starch that they include in the paper, that controls the absorption. So the type of starch, the amount of starch, how it's applied, all of these things can be factors. That's why you can't have two companies who make the exact same paper, and every paper you use is very different from the next, and can give you a completely different painting experience, to be honest. So let's get going here. I'm going to deal with some of the little speckles and white areas that I left behind, and that gets rid of all the white areas of my paper. I'm always happy when that part's done, right? I get rid of the unnecessary whites. So I'm going to use a little cobalt here, and I'm just going to use a small brush in my cobalt and work in a little bit of abstract reflection in here. Leave some white paper, but also bits of blue. So I'm not thinking about it too hard. I'm looking, but I don't see it affecting it too differently. Or being too specific about any of this. Some of them really are pretty white. So it just needs a little hint of blue. The other things, the other little flecks of whatever in the paper or in the water, I think I'll just do those with maybe a bit of what are they? They're kind of a little bit of a golden color. I'll use some of the raw sienna here. Thin it down so it's light. Blot it if it's too dark. If you put it down and it's too dark, just quickly take your paper towel and blot it. Yeah. Now, you know what we're missing? What I really want to have is some of those wormholes. But can I do any more to any of this first? I could. Maybe I will say, for example, I will wet. I'm going to wet this lily pad here and just clean water here, and so that I can add in a few ruffles in the to create a little bit of form, so it's not laying so flat like a piece of paper, right? Yes, they are flat, but they are a little bit rippled as well. So I'm going to come in here and wet this lily pad just one at a time. Clean water. Work around the neighbors carefully and don't reactivate that dark water. Now you'll see me lean to the side and I'm looking for the shine on my paper. I think not enough new painters are sort of adapting that visual of what the paper needs to look like before they start plopping on some color. If I always look for the same kind of shine, and it gets to be a familiar thing, then you will understand the right timing of things. You'll know what will happen. It'll be more predictable if you are always looking for the same sort of shine on your paper. So let me zoom in. I keep getting errors. I am so sorry. Errors in my I think I'm back. That was not fun. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry. I'm missing one of my screens here. I'll just hang in there. I'm back, sort of. There we go. I think I'm finally back. Well, that was not fun. Big blue screen of death, as I said. It was, yeah, it actually is a blue screen, and it said we've run into an area and have to restart. So that was totally my end. Sorry about that. And I'm going to go on to my next lily pad here to get this going here. So I'm going to wet, say this one here. So I'm going to wet this lily pad with clean water. I'm looking once again for that uniform shine. I'd have to crop that part out of my video, I guess. I don't know if I can do that on a live stream. Maybe I can after it's uploaded. I'll try. Going back to my water container multiple times so that I can keep it all wet at the same time. Trying really hard not to hit and activate that background color, the watercolor. The color of the water, I mean. Looking to make sure I haven't missed any spots, because that'll make a hard edge faster than anything, and you don't have any weirdness in. I'll use a little areolin to make my green. Boy, that's a bright green. Let's use more blue. But I will mix a little bit of that raw sienna into it because it's like a little too cheery and bright. All right, so in the middle of this, there's like a little starburst, and I'm gonna make this starburst with my strokes coming inward. There's a reason for this. When you start the stroke, you won't get that little I call it a pom-pom on a wet surface. If I take and I draw a line like this, and I lift my brush, that makes a little pom-pom. And I didn't want the tip of each of those to have that. So I started my stroke and ended it where it in the middle, because it wouldn't matter if you made that little pom-pom thing, right? Should be a little bit more blue, I think. Now, this isn't as noticeable on the reference as I'm doing it here. I'm exaggerating it, and I'm going to take some of that out because I did exaggerate it too much. I just want something subtle here. Wow, that part was really dry, right? Let's wet that brush and come into that. And let's take out a little bit of that color. Use my brush. So I'm not using my paper towel for this. I'm using my brush to drink up the extra, wipe it off on my paper towel, but I'm not using my paper towel to blot my paper. Once again, I got a hard line. You know why that causes that. It's too dry here. Let's dampen it all around it. Make sure I don't have any of that nonsense going on. Remember to continue it on either side of the petal there. Sometimes I forget and pull inward, and it's okay if you do. Like if I did that, I don't think anything's going to happen with that, but if you get that sort of burst at the end, that pom-pom, better happens out on the outside edge where it needs to be wider anyway. So these are all like little pie pieces, but don't cut it evenly like a pie. That will look really weird. Let's dampen this, make sure that stays wet. All right, so what I've created here is that sort of ruffle effect. They look like they have a little bit of this going on, right? I don't want to go too hog wild with this, so I'm just going to do this very subtly. Yeah, any of the tech issues seem to be on my end. Last one certainly was when my computer shut down right in the middle of a live stream. That's always fun. Not. So just don't have to do them everywhere. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Will look a lot more natural if you're sort of a little more random about it. So this one over here really feels to me like it's could use a little bit of ripple. It looks really, this one looks especially flat. So I want to get this one shaped up. Wetting first just makes everything really soft and subtle what you're doing when you add the color. So looking for that sort of nice satin sheen to the paper. No missed spots. Okay, let's do a little bit of this starburst in the middle. Oh, I keep forgetting, right? I got to go to the middle, not from the middle out. I'm coming towards the middle. And then when I do the ones on the outside, I am going from middle to outer edge because I want it to I want the bulk of the color at the edge rather than the middle like here. So I'm putting subtle stuff here. Uneven. Sorry, I was off screen there a bit. Let me zoom out. I think at this point I can zoom out. There we go. So I just wet that. And you can see all of a sudden my lilies are starting to develop into different colors and giving a lot more variety than just all the same. That one seems a little darker, a little bluer. And I can continue that on any of these lily pads that I want. I caught it, brazen. I caught it a little bit too late, sorry. Yes, I did get it. So to be clear, you are adding a little color to make the ripples, not lifting color. That is correct. I am adding color. I wet it first before adding that color so that all of this is soft and subtle. Wetting it first. Looking for a nice uniform shine, no puddles and no dry patches. I have to do something with that blue in a bit because it's striking me as being a little bit odd looking. A little bit more of a dark middle there. A little bit more cerulean blue type of green to create a few ripples. And if any of your lily pads ended up too light on your first pass, like, you know, when you first put your washes down, this is your chance. You can put a little color into your lily pad instead of just water. And then drop these in while it's still wet. Should be looking at my reference, I suppose. All right, so we're getting, you can definitely see that. I think I probably overdid it a little bit, but I'm going to start putting in some of the little wormholes and things like that. I'm going to use a little bit of burnt sienna anywhere where, you know, an edge might be getting a bit, like when a leaf gets older, it starts to brown a little bit. So I might put a little hint of that now and then. This one's still wet, so I can do that. So I'm just going to add a little bit of aged leaf. I just dropped in a little bit of burnt sienna there. Yes, it's basically a darker version of the first layer. I may not have matched it perfectly every time, and that's okay too. But it was cerulean, a bit of the aureolin, and that was a little bit too bright, so I put a little burnt raw sienna in it. So let's do a couple of these little holes, because they look, it's all nice and all fine and well, but they're too perfect. Sorry, like they're just too pristine. In nature you wouldn't find that. So let's take some of this background color here. That was a lot of neutral tint mixed with either burnt sienna, or I can incorporate some of the green as well. But I want to work on a dry area, so let's put some of this maybe. Let me dry this and then I'll add that in. Okay, not perfectly dry, but it's certainly not going to be a problem if I add something to it. All right, so let's find a couple of little blemishes. I'm going to hold my brush way back here so that I don't make perfect little circles. That would look really weird. And I'm just going to go for it. Obviously, it does not need to be the same as the reference. I like that burnt sienna on there. There's some areas here that definitely look a little more burnt sienna, so that's what I'm going to do. That's going to be a big one. It is now. So that's probably enough. I know there's more in the reference, but I you know, on these two, I probably don't need any more. Maybe I'll put one up here and maybe a 3 up there so it doesn't look too weird. You may even get, on occasion, let me see if I can find one spot here. You may get like where the lily pad gets torn a bit. You know, that's little bits of character that you can add in as well. This one back here in the reference picture is so riddled with holes, but we're not going to do that much. It's a little overkill, even though that's actually what it is, but it's just seems a bit too much. Almost a distraction because there's so much of it. It's important to make them odd shapes and sizes so that they don't look weird. Oh, I'm spacing things out. I got to stop doing that. Okay, let's do something here. And oh, there now. Spacing evenly always looks strange. I haven't put the ripples on these two, so I won't bother with that right now. Now they look a little stiff, so I'm going to take a blotted brush here and just soften up some of them. Basically smear the edges of some of these. Because if I do that, it looks a little bit more like this, which was done on wet paper. I won't do all of them. I just, you know, I want to have some of these looking like they're bleeding into the lily pad, but they don't all have to be the same. You know, this is all in an effort to make them look a bit more natural. So I've smeared a few, and now we need to have the darker water in the middle of these. So I'm going to make sure this is dry and add in some of the dark bits in the middle. Okay, so now we need the darker, like the neutral tint, to create the actual hole in the middle of this. So I'm going into each of these little spots and adding in my extra dark here. You don't have to nail it. Yeah, it just has to be kind of a dark area within that little mark. And if you miss one, it's okay. Maybe it's just a hole that's starting. There's that little tiny bit of green I almost missed earlier, so I'm going to put that in now. Tiny, tiny. And okay, so I've got some of the imperfections in the first few of these, and I haven't put the ripples in these. This one sort of suggests a little bit of ripple. Maybe that one's okay to do. So maybe I'll just go for it, and I'll put in some of the blemishes here. Put in a real crack in the break on the edge of the lily pad there. Blot and soften if you need to, if you want to create that sort of, I don't know what the word is, but the blended edges of the rusty little spots on the leaf. That'll be enough, I think. I don't want to go overboard. I've got quite a few little spots in there as it is. If you really feel like some of them are too much, you can lighten up, blot and lighten some of them up if you want to. Or not blot, but you dampen it and then pull it off. These little holes will be at various stages, right? So I can kind of lighten up a few of them if I feel like they're all too much the same. There, I'm lightening up a few, and that feels even more natural, right? Just to do that. All right, I've only got one more lily pad to do, so I'm just going to quickly do it. Wet it first, put the little ruffles in it. And they may not all be equally ruffled, and it's really something you've got to kind of rein yourself in about with these ruffles. It's so easy to get carried away. Sometimes you just need one or two little bits, and maybe that's all it needs, right? Just that little tiny bit. One going off this way, perhaps, and that's it. So I can dry this. My painting's getting pretty close to done. I really want to get some extra darks in and around the actual flower itself. That's really going to bring the focus into the flower itself. Take a little bit away from some of these lily pads that are part of the composition, yes, definitely, but they are not a focal point. So, it's kind of like one of these things is not like the other scenario where you've got the flowers clearly different than the lily pads. So it stands out anyway because it's different color, different shape, different thing altogether. But it doesn't need to be. I want this to be a little bit more focused. Okay. I think I'm getting all the questions. Thank you for putting your questions in caps, by the way. That makes it a lot easier for me to see. I think I can see a few small vertical edges. Would I just paint the outer edge a bit green? Oh, I know what you're saying. Yes. So the edges of the lily pads, may have a little extra green along the edges because they aren't paper thin. They actually do have a bit of volume to them. So you may see a couple of things like a dark along an edge here and there of the green, that is. That sort of thing. I'm pretty sure that's what you're talking about, Margot. But what I would do, since it's not like a box where it has a corner, I would soften the top of this. So you put your line in, but don't leave it just a line. It will look really cartoon-like. So soften the top of it so that it looks like it's rounded. All right, so I'm going to put a lot of neutral tint into this next part. Now, because I already have a lot of color down here, I think I'm just going to wet this and add it into a wet surface. So taking here, I'll take this big one here. This one holds lots of water. So I'm going to come into this area here. I can only get so close with this giant brush, so I won't try to get into those little corners. I can use a smaller brush for that, but I am wetting this. Now, having dried that, this paint's not going anywhere. It's staying put. Even though there's a lot on there, as long as I'm not like aggressively brushing this, it'll stay put. And that's a really good thing to know when you want to sort of add more layers. So I'm just going to brush that out. Whenever you have a wet surface like this and you're painting into it, everything always dries a lot lighter. Leaning over to see the shine, see what I missed, spots that I've missed in the middle, that sort of thing. Now, before I actually start adding color, let's tune up and get around the lily pad as close, or the lily as close as I can. Get tucked into those little tight spots. I can do this as I'm adding the color too, but it's almost better if I can just wet it first, so that I don't have any unexpected hard edges that are going to give me problems. All right, so I'm going to go into my neutral tint, not too watered down. I've already got a watered down surface, so I don't need my paint watered down. So in here, in particular, I really want to have higher contrast, especially around the Waterlily. It's going to really pop off the page once I get this contrast in there, because without, the painting looks a little bit more 2D. It doesn't have the dimension of having full value range. Now there's something here, and it's I don't know what that is, that little thing. To me it's a little distracting. It might be roots, but I think I can live without that in this one. If you want to leave them, let me show you how to put them in if you want them in. Okay, so I might work on either side of that. What I perceive to be a root. So I'm working on either side of that, and So you can detect a line there, but it's not that defined, right? It's just enough to give you the concept of, oh, there's something right there. I could also use my brush and pull a little bit of color out, though I really try not to do that. I find that when you lift color, sometimes you get this chalkiness, kind of a chalky vibe to things. And I don't always like that look. So you know, if you can do it without actually lifting, that would be better. But sometimes you have to do what you have to do. Make sure that blends in. Setting myself up for some really high contrast around the focal point. Boy, that's really going to make this feel a lot more dimensional. Coming in with rich color here is important, just so that I know I'm going to end up with something closer to the dark values I'm aiming for. I can work around that because I didn't get the reflection wet. It's crazy how we felt that reflection was so dark in the beginning, right? I need to get into this little spot. Working carefully so I don't put my arm in wet color. All right, and if I can use a little bit more elsewhere, okay, let's do that. So let's use some clean water first. I'm putting my arm in paint here. You know, this is kind of like the last touch, but boy, can that make a difference. Just sometimes you drop those darks in and it just comes alive. Let's go a little darker, especially here. This is where we're setting up our contrast around our water lily, but it is actually darker up there, so let's one thing I find, the difference between Payne's gray and neutral tint is often that the neutral tint will dry a lot lighter than Payne's gray. Payne's gray tends to be definitely a stronger dark. It's also cooler dark. But I find the neutral tint, as much as I love the color, it will often dry much lighter than I'm hoping for. So that's all part of getting used to what colors you're using too. You will find that certain colors you've got to use a little bit more paint in order for it to dry according to what you have in mind, because it never dries exactly the same as what it looks like when it's wet. You know, and I can add in a couple of little darks here and there if if I feel like I need something else. Only if there's still some shine here, though. No, I think that's getting too dry. Usually where the paper's bubbled up, it starts drying there first, and the low spots are going to have more moisture. So it's not evenly dry as much as it was earlier. But I'm pretty pleased with the sort of the light areas that are coming through here. I think that they're fairly convincing. Lifting out color, I was going to show that. So if I wanted to lift some of this out, I would just have a blotted brush and pull that along. Wipe it off on my paper towel. Don't blot your paper itself. You know, and any other little sort of blemishes or imperfections you want to put in your water. It doesn't look like a duckweed or anything like that. It's something else maybe. Little interesting lights and shadows. This is jumping out at me because it's a little bit too golden. So let's green that down a little bit, and maybe bring a few more darks into this section right here too. Oh, and I did say I wanted to do something with that blue, didn't I? Sometimes I get ahead of myself. All right, so I'm going to go over the blue with the clean water. And as I come in to add in a few of these darks, I'm going to just come down and to touch some of that. That will help connect them, you know, the softer line. Because what was bothering me so much about that was the sudden harsh line, and it was kind of a stripe. So I wanted to make sure that I did something to remedy that, because it wasn't looking right the way it was. Let's go with a little thicker color here. And I may come in with a little bit of white paint just to put in a couple of the, like up here I forgot the bubble, the little bit of bubble in that spot. Too much contrast there. Let's blend that out a little bit. So as I'm looking, and sometimes it's easy sometimes for me. I look up on the screen rather than looking directly at my painting. I see a lot of people do this, and I think it's a really good idea. When you know, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. I'm working here and I'm really close to it and I'm looking right at it close. But actually, it's better to look at your painting from a distance, because then you can see whether the whole thing is working together or not. And sometimes taking a photo of it is a good way to give you that feeling of looking at it from a distance and seeing it. It's amazing how different it can look in a photograph than when you are looking at it really close and really critically as you're working on it. Okay, let's think about a little bit of white paint, and I think that's going to finish off this one. But I'm just going to put a little more blue in before I do. How's the water lily looking? The actual flower. Not bad. I think I could almost warm it up just a little tad in the center. So if I took a little permanent rose or something and then added it to my yellow. This was a gamboge that I, first an areolan and then a gamboge that I used. But if I put a little bit of, just a tiny bit of red in there, give myself a bit of orange. Oop, might be too much. I can bring even more contrast and color into my main subject. Need clean paper towel. The other one's dirty from other stuff, and I sure don't want to mess up my Waterlily at this point. Just a little hints of it, just to make a little bit more contrast around that. So I'm thinking I'd like to, this ugly, and I'm going to put some white paint on here just for a couple of the final touches. You know, it always looks better with the white tape off, right? Or the beige tape off, show the white edges. I will keep it stapled though. I'm not going to take it off the board for quite a while because I don't want the dampness that's still in the paper. And it might feel fine on the surface, but inside the paper, or even as far as the back of the paper, there's still dampness there, and it could potentially wrinkle the paper. In fact, I'm sure it would. So there, that looks better with the white around the outsides. But let me grab some white paint first, and I'm just going to put just a finishing touch here or there. And I am going to use a little of that bleed-proof white, which earlier somebody was asking about the fact that this stuff crystallizes. It's the strangest thing. You look in, it looks like it's full of snowflakes. And you add water to it. That crystallization has happened to me a number of times. And I've added water to it. Now you have to stir it well and sort of set it aside. And those crystals do eventually just get creamy again. I wouldn't add too much water. Now, is this dry enough that I can do this? I don't know. Down here, I forgot a couple of those little water bubbles here, so I can do that. I can even take, like I use the lid to mix colors in, so if I wanted to, I could put a little blue in here as well. So if I'm taking my cobalt, because I would need an opaque color to cover up that dark, so I could potentially put in a little bit of this blue, and you could see by adding the white to it, it covers up. I would not do this to fix everything in your painting though. This is for accents only. It will look very repaired, I guess, and overworked if you start to do things like white over something or start adding a bunch of gouache or something like that. It can very often look a little bit too overworked. I'm not making it like the photo, but I just wanted to put a couple of little accents here and there. I think even in here I could put a little bit of highlight. White's always, these little white accents, that's always something that I do last. Because once you get any of this white paint into your paint or the paint on your paper, it's like putting cream in your coffee. You can't get it out again. You're done, you know. And if I try to soften an edge, that I wouldn't try to do that actually with this white, because it will end up bleeding out and making like a ghost halo around things, and it won't look good. So be very, very careful of using white in your painting, especially as a correction tool. Doesn't always do what you want it to and give you the result that you're hoping for. So I think that's probably enough. I might tone this down a little bit. I don't like to have too much of that sort of thing happening at the edge of my paper. It's almost a little too bright, but it will dry duller. Like it won't be as stark white as when it's wet. It will get duller. And so there we go. I think that's going to wrap this one up. Nice soft colors in the petals, dark contrast and ripples in the water that I think they look fairly convincing. So let's come back here. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm sorry about the video problems. As I said, we're gonna be looking at probably a new internet provider so that we don't have these issues. It's something new that's happened, and I'm not really sure what's going on, but it seems to be the internet connection. Anyway, so thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining me, and I want to thank everybody who sent me images and paintings that they've been doing for critique. They have, I got a tremendous response, actually. I have a lot of paintings. So we'll probably start looking at critiques next week in the live stream. And thank you so much for sending those in. I don't know how many, I don't think I'm probably good for next week. But you can continue to send them to me in any case, and I will try to cover it, if not next future critique session. So thank you for that, and enjoy painting your water lily. Have a great week, everybody. Stay warm. Bye.